I am merely a collector and organizer of others' possessions. Sir Henry Wotton's words resonate within my mind as Skuggy flees with his stolen goods, already 4 hours ahead of the Normans who slumber in unwary bliss. The cattle he takes with him require slow and painstaking travel through the wooded terrain, allowing only a lead of 8 or 10 miles at best. However, the enemy may probably strike the Saxons under cover of night, a fact that Skuggy takes into account, for if the robbery is not uncovered before the return of the expedition, then his prize will be safely stowed aboard the schooner. Meanwhile, Gormar returns to the Saxon camp, dismissed brusquely by Skuggy, yet pondering the man's motives for such erratic behaviour. He has no doubt that Skuggy had some purpose in mind, if not a daring exploit, that dictated his movements. After arriving back at the encampment, Gormar wastes no time in waking Ragnvald, the chief, and subsequently the entire camp. A war council is swiftly assembled, with Hereward and Bjarni suggesting an attack upon the enemy. Despite the numerical disadvantage, however, the others decide that such an outcome would result in failure, and instead prepare to flee. As the group hastily departs, Ragnvald inquires about Skuggy's whereabouts. Gormar informs him that he last saw Skuggy lurking within reach of a Norman sentinel, within sight of their campfires. But as for his motives, he knows not. Ragnvald expresses his doubt about Skuggy's cleverness and foresight, believing that it could ultimately lead him into trouble. "Fret not, my liege. It shall require every ounce of Norman cunning to ensnare this slippery fish. The ancient wisdom within his skull shall grant him the ability to outmaneuver his adversaries effortlessly. Mark my words, he may even evade death's clutches with his guile. Surely he knows of our impending departure and will follow when he sees fit. No, I do believe he has already surpassed us. He instructed me that he would round the great Nab's head by daybreak. We should cross paths with him before long." Thus we marched on steadfastly through the night. As the sun began to rise, our path became smoother and more agreeable. We rounded the blunt promontory indicated by Skuggy, known colloquially as the Great Nab's Head. Before long we spied Skuggy and his confederate Grizzly, reclining idly on a leafy bank. Skuggy relished his ration of salt beef and bread, while Grizzly finished off a rabbit he had hunted for himself. "Ha, Skuggy!" exclaimed the Earl. "You're alive and well, I see. What dust-up have you been fomenting? Did you scout the Norman camp, perhaps?" "Scout, my lord? Heavens, no. If scouting means staring blankly at some rock like a molted bird, then count me out. I don't scout. I always find a way to get things done." "Excellent point, Skuggy. So what resplendent deed did you achieve this time? Have you been discovered at last? Come with me, my lord, and you will soon see." With that, Skuggy led us over the bale of the hill and into a paradisiacal dell. A rivulet of fresh water flowed lazily through it, surrounded by an abundance of lush vegetation. In addition, a herd of 20 cattle grazed contentedly on the verdant fields. "There, my dear friend, I fear our journey would be fruitless, for the babbling of people and the constant chatter of geese have always confounded me. Both of these things are useless and provide no benefit. Singing has also never been my forte, so I have abandoned that pursuit. However, I have a score to settle with the Normans, so I have taken a few of their cattle. They will surely serve us well atop the hill. If we find we no longer require them, we can simply return them without harm." "Well said, Skuggy. Each person has their own strengths. You certainly possess them. However, it is wise we depart soon, lest the Normans reclaim their livestock while we remain idle. Of course, my friend, we may reach our vessel without delay unless the Normans decide to impede our progress. Come, Grizzly, in these times, animal husbandry is a respectable and honest profession. The Scots and Danes, who once engaged in thievery, have yielded their business to better men. It shocks me to see how much more respectable and upstanding the trade has become." Having spoken, Skuggy and his trusty dog set off to gather the cattle. Soon we resumed our journey with the utmost speed. Everyone was eager to hear about Skuggy's daring adventure, which he recounted with a touch of dark humour and visible enjoyment. We arrived at our destination without interference from the enemy, as they were preoccupied with their own affairs. It was suggested we wait until nightfall to embark on our vessel to avoid tipping off the enemy to our movements. We made sure to have a gangway ready in case of an emergency and stationed lookout scouts to prevent surprises. During the day, the cattle grazed nearby in the woods. As night fell, we herded them onto the vessel and weighed anchor, standing across the bay. We eventually reached our destination without any issues, though we had to take great care due to the cattle. Chapter 34. Wild Daring of Bjarni the Viking. When Greeks joined Greeks, then was the tug of war. These words by Nathaniel Lee rang true for Bjarni when the Saxon leaders chose not to attack the Normans, allowing them to capture the Saxons without resistance. Despite Bjarni's fervent pleas for Hereward to join him, he was left to pursue vengeance alone. His burning hatred for the Normans drove him to seek any opportunity to spill their blood. Fueled by grit and determination, Bjarni set out to attack the enemy solo, relying on his knowledge of the terrain and his own fighting prowess to keep him safe from capture. Gazing across the landscape at the mountains cloaked in bracken and bush, Bjarni sought a suitable spot to stage his offensive. He found a stretch of land with intermingled boulders and bushes on one side and a 20-foot drop into a trout stream on the other. Bjarni climbed a short distance from the path and laid himself down amidst the bracken, his broadsword ready by his side. For over an hour Bjarni waited in ambush, taken over by a fervent hatred that drowned out all rational thought. He lay still, with wild and turbulent passions fermenting within him, awaiting the approach of the Norman soldiers. Upon the still night air came the sound of footsteps, treading stealthily. Bjarni leapt to his feet at the first noise, securing his helmet, closing his visor, and correcting his mailcoat that had got a little skewed. Brandishing his powerful broadsword, he made a forceful lunge at his invisible adversary, and then, satisfied, took refuge behind a mammoth boulder clad with thickets of foliage that obstructed the impending foe, with him being able to eye their movements. Dawn was approaching fast, the sunlight already illuminating Helvelin's crown in the distance with a golden halo. Yet the remnant of the fading night lingered mournfully in the pass, as nature, in sorrowful shame, yearned to mask this war frenzy of men and the endeavor unfolding right in front of her gaze. The unsuspecting foe advanced noiselessly with muffled tones and a cat-like gait. The leading column of the enemy's troops snaked past his hiding spot. Bjarni gripped his sword impatiently, powerless to resist the lure of a Norman foe within his reach. The Normans moved on, oblivious to the fierce human tiger lurking nearby, preparing for the pounce. File after file of the Norman army marched by, some men leading their horses but most on foot with the rear ranks overtaking them. Bjarni's frustration boiled over. He raged and slashed at the fleeing soldiers, mercilessly cutting them down and some falling off the precipice, seeking reprieve from his assault. Suddenly, the Normans realized that a solo Saxon warrior had made the attack, and with a roar of, "The mad Saxon! Get him to the ground! Cut him through!" 100 swords were hurriedly unsheathed. A united charge ensued as the Normans bawled after Bjarni, dashing down the path away from his foiled chance with his pursuers baying like hounds on his heels. An expert mountaineer and hunter, he deftly navigated his way through the rugged hills, tearing through thick vegetation and defying the boundaries of mere mortals. His legs, toughened over a lifetime of fearless exploration, propelled him with unmatched speed and agility. Glancing back at the crew tailing him, he sneered with derision at their feeble efforts to keep up. Enraged by their pitiful display, he grabbed a rock and hurled it at them with such force that it maimed a poor sap unfortunate enough to be in its path. With his sword at the ready, he continued charging towards the summit with no regard for the Normans trailing him. At the pinnacle, he stopped to collect his thoughts, admiring his sword, formerly addressed as Turfing. "Another drop of Norman blood," he crows with a blend of pleasure and bloodlust. Glancing at his blade and remarking on its sharpness, he goes into a fit of explosive rage, as if he is at war with a hidden enemy. Sweat trickles down his face as he hacks and slashes, unleashing his fury. However, his human body failed him, and he collapsed in a heap of exhaustion that can rightfully be called a stupor. For nearly 60 minutes he lay still as stone, motionless and inert. If the Normans had any knowledge of the intense drama unfolding behind the mountain's crest, Bjarni would have met his demise on that fateful day. The Normans had encountered Bjarni's strength and his reckless audacity so many times that they would have paid a king's ransom to capture this formidable foe. However, it was not to be the last time that Bjarni would inflict fear into their ranks when they least anticipated it. As the sun sailed through the sky, Bjarni demonstrated signs of regaining consciousness. He stretched his muscles and then briefly opened his eyes. Dazed by his surroundings, he sat up and gradually remembered the events that led to his current stupor. Through sheer determination, he rose and stumbled to a cold spring of water that flowed from the clouds perpetually surrounding the mountain's peak. Bjarni indulged in a refreshing gulp of the freezing water before pouring it over his throbbing temples. He then consumed a hearty meal of roasted kid's flesh and bread, washing it down with more water. Feeling rejuvenated, Bjarni climbed to the highest peak, stretched out, and studied every corner of the surrounding valleys, meticulously observing every suspicious element within his range of vision. He then meticulously scanned the neighboring mountains. From his vantage point, Bjarni caught sight of the Normans hustling back and forth near their camp, situated 5 miles away. However, there was no indication of any threat to his position. Rising to his feet, Bjarni strode along the ridge for a couple of miles before descending to move around another mile or two in an oblique direction that would obscure him in the dense forest covering both sides of the valley's lower reaches. Descending and parting the undergrowth, he stumbled upon a stream of water that sprang from its stony bed in a single towering leap of 80 feet to tumble into a frothing basin. The surrounding amphitheatre appeared as though it had been carved out by the tremendous force of the water's descent and the erosion of the rock beneath it. The savage wanderer stood before the edge of the precipice, his arms folded across his broad chest. The rawness of this scene suited his grim and rugged nature, calming his internal turmoil. Raucous jackdaws darted through the air, nesting within alcoves and perched on rocks. Swallows skittered and swooped effortlessly, entering their expertly made clay homes clinging to the sides of the sheer cliffs. The biota present thrived, densely populated in every niche. Bjarni continued to gaze down the winding channel, savouring the solitude that he held dear, taking notice of every plant and tree. Eventually, he turned toward the cavernous depths and studied 3 large stones, arranged next to each other, for a brief moment. Then he shifted the position of one and nimbly leaped onto a sloping rock surface, repeating this process multiple times until he had travelled a considerable distance down. As he disappeared from sight, Bjarni crawled on hands and knees into the hidden crevice within the rocks, opening up into a spacious cave littered with indications of human use. Discarding his armor and sheathing his sword, he collapsed onto a bed made of dried ferns and grasses, falling into a deep slumber. 2 ragged men approached with a brace of rabbits and a young fawn slung over one man's shoulder, followed closely by a pair of fierce hounds. The men surveyed the 3 stones before them, and one exclaimed, "The leader is here!" To this the other man grumbled in response, "Unpromising fortune." Despite their doubts, they moved the 2 stones and trailed after their chief back to his secluded hideaway. As one man set to start a fire, the other began skinning and cleaning the animals they had brought. Once the task was completed, a massive iron cauldron was hoisted on crosspoles above the flames, filled with a gallon of water. The rabbits and venison were lowered into the cauldron, along with a few savoury herbs and roots and a hefty amount of salt. The second man retrieved a vessel of soaked corn that was then emptied into the pot in batches of 2 or 3 pounds each. Then the 2 men settled in for a well-deserved meal. As their stew cooked, Bjarni snored on while the other 2 engaged in a hushed conversation, casting looks and gestures in the leader's direction. "There shall be tumultuous times once more, I assure you," said one. "Indeed, plenty of bloodsheds, and we shall flee over the hills with those Normans on our heels," replied the other. "Before too long, there will not be enough of us to fight or to do anything else. The attrition has been terrible," lamented the first. The other shrugged it off, saying, "Well, at least it won't be a coward's demise. That is a small consolation." The aroma of their simmering meal soon grew too tempting for the men to resist. "Wake the leader," commanded the first man. "He must be the first to break his fast." The second man shook Bjarni awake, and he greeted his loyal men. "Skalds, how go things?" he inquired. "The falcons haven't been as active lately," one said, "but we have not gone hungry. But soon you'll need to be alert, For the old eagle has caused destruction with the hawks down in the nearby pass. At least a dozen of them won't be swooping down on their prey any longer. Nevertheless, I am eager to try your stew. Hot meals have been scarce as of late. Where are your companions? They are dispersed quite a bit. There are 12 lurking among the spears. Some of the men with families have settled near deep waters. Send them signals. We've been inactive for far too long. It's time to rouse ourselves, for the Norman gains a firmer hold on us with each day we waste, Bjarni told the two. Chapter 35. The Saxon Devil and the Wicked Abbot. When the darkness of night engulfs the streets, the sons of Belial emerge, filled with insolence and wine. So spoke Milton, and so began the sorrowful tale of us Saxon monks. Our monastic way of life was disrupted by the arrival of foreign monks, whose immorality brought with it the vice of uncleanness. This was an offence unheard of amongst the Saxons, and greatly despised. Even the fierce Norsemen, who held seduction, adultery, and the violation of blood relationships in loathing, could not escape the Normans' corrupt influence. Wild soldiers and monks alike lived disordered lives, and the most reprehensible offender was our new abbot. He inflicted numerous outrages, sneaking out of the monastery under the cover of darkness to carry out lascivious intent. Even if violent crimes resulted from his efforts, he remained undeterred. My appeals for help were in vain, and the Count, Elfrida's father, either was powerless or apathetic. I suspect both. Sometimes the Saxons would respond in fury and vengeance against these ruffians, but the docile serfs were most often too broken in spirit to offer any opposition. They endured unspeakable indignities to avoid being punished, as any demonstration of resistance would only result in vindictive and severe retribution. I recall only one act of retaliation against our abbot by Skuggi, who punished the wicked priest to his great amusement. Despite his violent tendencies, the abbot was most superstitious, as are most wicked and ignorant people. Skuggi was very observant, and easily deduced this weakness, thereby teaching the abbot a most valuable and effective lesson. One of the servants had repeatedly lamented to Skuggi about the violation of his home's sanctity by a man. Skuggi held a deep hatred for the abbot, as did anyone who knew him. Skuggi's sympathy was always extended to his countrymen, and he often made a substantial difference in their lives. Skuggi thought long and hard, and came up with a plan that he believed would have the desired effect if it were carried out successfully. Skuggi donned a Saxon devil costume, the Zernebock, to make himself look incredibly ridiculous, horns and a tail included. He also dressed one of his hounds in an outrageous outfit. They set out at night, ready to thwart the abbot's malevolent plans. They lay in hiding, ready to frighten and terrify the abbot into giving up on his nefarious scheme. The night selected for Skuggi's scheme was dark, with no moon, and the forest was even more obscure due to the additional shadows. Skuggi waited quietly for the abbot to approach before stepping into his path with the hound at his side. Together they confronted the quarry, and the abbot was terrified by the gruesome appearance before him. His legs shook, and his teeth chattered as the devil's temper rose, and he addressed the abbot with anger. "Abbot, I am the devil Zernebock, and I know why you're here. I have come to kill you, and my hound will tear you to pieces. Your vicious cup is full, and you have 2 minutes to prepare for death." The devil then lifted up a mighty sword that appeared as tall as the trees, although it was made of wood, and it was too dark for the abbot to notice. In a state of abject terror, he fell to his knees, imploring the aid of every saint to defend him, writhing and groaning in utter desperation. "Silence!" bellowed the fiend with even greater ferocity. "You must die! I have long awaited the opportunity to slay you. The saints shall not save you now, for you claim to be a holy man, yet tonight you embark on a wicked mission. Finally, I have been granted permission to end your life. It is now in my hands. Are you prepared?" growled the fiend, as his hound, sensing its master's aggression, bristled with fury, snapping and snarling menacingly, eagerly awaiting the order to attack. "Speak," commanded the demon. "Your time has come." The fiend lifted his sword menacingly, its blade ominously swaying back and forth. "Show mercy, demon," shrieked the abbot. "I shall vow to repent my sins, to forsake all earthly pleasures. I shall begin mortifying my flesh this very night. I vow to abstain from food and drink for 1 full year if you would but spare me." "Silence when I command you," the fiend roared again. "You are a hypocrite, and your vow is empty. Are you prepared? Hurry now. Bow your head so I can sever it cleanly." With a sudden burst of energy, the stout and pudgy abbot sprang to his feet and took off running with uncanny speed. "Quiet now," said the fiend to his hound. The vicious creature gave a low growl and darted forward, swiftly catching up to the abbot and sinking its teeth into his lower body, causing him to fall to the ground with a howl of agony. Writhing and screaming in agony, the abbot desperately struggled against the powerful jaws of the hound, which clamped onto him like a vice and gnawed on him with even greater fervour. At last the fiend called off his hound, lifting his sword over the prostrate abbot. "You shall not attempt to take flight, for your fate is sealed, and I am here to end your life. You must choose now whether to be torn apart by my hound or vanquished by my sword of fire. There is no escape for you." "Have mercy, demon!" the abbot cried out in anguish. "Your hound has almost taken my life. Its hot teeth have left me torn and near death. Please, in mercy, let me have some time for repentance. Consider the fate of my poor soul." "I am the wicked demon, and mercy is not in my nature when it comes to your soul. It is forfeit and mine to claim. But what of your body? Decide quickly. Will I kill you with my sword, or will my hound devour you?" Just as the fiend was about to act, footsteps and voices drew near, and a pair of troops came upon the scene, disturbed by the abbot's cries of pain. The demon and its hound vanished into the forest, leaving the troopers to find the injured abbot. As they approached the abbot, they were startled to see him lying flat and bellowing out curses. He pleaded for the saints to help, and quickly recognized the pair of troops. "Your Reverence, what happened here? Are you all right?" "Praise be to the saints. The demon has fled, and the Blessed Virgin has sent me help, but too late. I am dying. Had you come a moment later, my body would have been devoured as well." "What happened, Your Reverence? Were you attacked by wolves?" "Alas, I met the devil Zernebock and his furious hellhound. They both set upon me, and the demon was about to kill me with his fiery sword when you drew near. His hound has left me grievously injured." His incandescent teeth glowed, and a stream of fire erupted from his terrifying mouth. "Is it possible to assist me? For I am uncertain if I have any legs left to stand upon." "No, not there. As I informed you, he brutally tore me from behind. Lift me by the shoulder, but stay away from my lower back. Steady yourselves, you drunken scoundrels. Did I not warn you to stay focused?" he yelled out as he vented his fury. "One of you ought to go for assistance. My associate will remain by my side till you return," suggested one of the troopers. "Do not move, rogue. You will not budge from my vicinity, any of you, not even an inch. If the devil comes back, the other one will undoubtedly flee, and I will be killed and eaten. Hoist me up, you sluggards. All of you are competent enough." Eventually, through strenuous efforts of pulling and lifting, they were able to stand the abbot upright. However, he could not bear to walk or be carried, nor would he be left alone for even a moment. He made an attempt to hobble along, but each stride was excruciating, and he cursed vehemently at the two troopers as he prayed to the saints. Their journey home was torturous and extensive. Clutching his saviours in terror, he was almost driven to madness by every rustle in the nearby bushes, envisioning the demon and his canine in every inanimate object. They finally reached the abbey after much hardship. The abbot was bedridden, and the hound had inflicted severe wounds to his posterior. 2 monks were designated to nurse him daily, while the others were mandated to pray and fast for hours on end. Through careful nursing, the abbot was eventually healed, but the painful lesson he learned remained with him. He firmly believed that it was the Saxon devil, Zernebock, and his hellhound that had attacked him. He could not risk wandering outside after dark until the fiend had been banished from the woods nearby. What followed was quite amusing. The monks organized a procession to the location of the attack. One monk led the solemn procession while carrying a crucifix with the body of our blessed Lord. Others followed, holding sacred relics acquired from Normandy. Many were bones of eminent saints of the order, along with a shred of our Saviour's garment, the same garment that soldiers cast lots for. There was also a front tooth from the Apostle Peter, which was supposedly broken out during the Last Supper of our Lord. Another relic was a small vial of tears shed by Peter during his denial when he went out and wept bitterly. Lastly, one monk had a pair of leathern thongs, said to have been used to fasten the sandals of the Apostle John during his time on the lonely isle of Patmos. Following them were Skuggi and several lay brothers of the monastery, carrying large ewers containing holy water, with which they liberally sprinkled the path and its surroundings, while chanting psalms and reciting prayers for exorcism. They hoped to drive away all evil spirits and devils that haunted the woods. One can scarcely imagine the uncontrollable delight with which Skuggi participated in this solemn event. When he relayed the entire tale to me, I could not help but laugh most immoderately. Though such levity hardly became my position, I could not resist as I remembered how our sacred relics were associated with this ridiculous spectacle. Although I cannot excuse the deception perpetrated, it had a most salutary effect on the abbot. The incident caused him to rarely venture outside at night to commit his vile deeds. However, like most wicked and despicable individuals, he found other detestable means of fulfilling his cruel and notorious lusts.
Chapter 36. Lovers Plotting.
Farewell, farewell. The parting is both bitter and sweet, as Shakespeare once wrote. The date for Elfrida's ill-fated wedding draws near all too quickly. She meets with her Saxon lover frequently in desperation as the dreaded day approaches. As she climbs the rough stone stairs to the tower tonight, her heart lightens with each laboured step. By the time she reaches the top, night dominates the quiet surroundings. She paces back and forth on the turret, lost in thought, occasionally peering hopefully towards the nearby forest and waving her handkerchief. The darkness of night makes it impossible to know whether someone is there to witness her signal. She descends to the top of the stairs, listening for the sound of his footsteps. Though Ragnvald is risking everything to save her, and fate seems to grow more ominous every day, she entertains only pleasant thoughts and smiles tonight, imagining a possible escape from the dreaded union. Why? Her champion, the Saxon chieftain, will be there tonight. With him near, she feels safe and fearless. But this buoyant hopefulness is just as quickly replaced by hopelessness and fear when he is gone, when Valdis, her unwanted suitor, takes his place. As the date of the wedding draws near, Valdis grows more intrusive and repugnant, and Elfrida struggles to hide the disgust she feels for him. She had come to understand the futility of resistance and showing displeasure towards him, for she had no hope that he would relent in his determination to force this marriage contract. As she listened, a faint grating sound caught her attention, and she strained to hear more. Soon she heard movement on the winding staircase. Rushing to the platform, she peered into the darkness below. Finally, Ragnvald embraced her. "My lonely watcher," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "How long have you been waiting here? Are you not afraid of the dark?" "I am not afraid tonight, my love," she replied. "I may be weak as a woman, but my fortitude allows me to do anything for you. Besides, why fear the darkness? It's just God's gentle coverlet draped over sleeping nature. Your good angel watches over you, Elfrida, day and night, near or far. Be brave, my love. I have faith in God and in you, my Saxon lover. But sometimes my heart fails me as the day of fate draws near. What if Valdis forces me to marry him at the altar? I keep a sharp and bright little friend, and there are limits beyond which I will not go with him. Hush, my dear. Those thoughts are cruel. You will not need to resort to that dreadful alternative. Valdis will meet his own fate, which he deserves for attempting to force his hand against all reason. No more unpleasant thoughts. Shall we talk about the project? Have you grown more comfortable with it?"
My love, do not consider me foolish, but ever since you revealed your desire to compete in the tournament, I have been tasked with a venture of my own. Despite my reservations, I fear that you may be discovered should you enter the lists without a more effective disguise. Thus, I have been exercising my mind to determine a solution. Might I suggest a little ruse to deceive my father? I have a cousin who took arms with the King of Spain against the Moors in the south. He has been praised for his valor by the Spanish monarch. If we were to convey a message to my father stating that this knight shall attend the festival and compete, you could assume his guise.
you would easily pass for this valiant southern knight, so long as you could arrive in time to have little opportunity for discourse. Your followers would also need to perform their roles faithfully to preclude suspicion, Elfrida explained. Ragnald commented with a smile. Ah, set love a-plotting, and the thing shall be accomplished in an instant. His beloved replied seriously, Nonsense. Do not joke with me. Hear me out. I have begun to embroider magnificent adornments for your horse with unique southern motifs. I acquired this knowledge from the convent sisters. You may think it a mad whim, but no, I assure you it shall be perfect. No, no, Lady Suspicion, Ragnvald exclaimed. Bending down to kiss her, he tightened his embrace. I nearly fear the plots that you are capable of weaving. I never thought I would find such a crafty schemer in you. You have unravelled the weakness of our plan. I, too, dreaded the exposure to the field. You have conquered my one hesitation. Now reveal to me the remainder of your designs, my dear. Come with me to my chamber, my love. All is silent there, Elfrida replied, taking Ragnald's hand.
Together they descended the winding stair in search of Elfrida's quarters. Here, she and Mireille had been adroitly embroidering intricate designs onto the trappings of the knights' horses and the men-at-arms. Ragnvald's were the most sumptuous, embroidered with silk and gold on the finest bayou cloth, and created by Elfrida's own hands. The work was beautiful and chaste, as she had poured not only her skill, but also her affection into the champion's harness. The figures were whimsical, the design original, and the final product was so rich and refined that no prince could have boasted more tasteful and imposing regalia for his steed. Mireille had also done her utmost to ensure that her valiant squire was suitably dressed, reflecting his master's grandeur. Ragnvald accepted the garments graciously. "Well, dearest," he said, "it's obvious that nobody expects a crude Saxon fugitive to look and behave like a Norman prince, and I believe that nobody will notice your disguise. Love may not be blind in this circumstance, dear Elfrida, but it comes with foresight. There's only one condition left to confirm and perfect our preparations, and that's whether your valiant cousin is deserving of your affection. But, my love, let me ask you this. What if Valdis is defeated ignominiously? Will the victor be allowed to claim the spoils of war, which in this case is the fair queen of this grand festival? Beware! If you evade Valdis's traps, there's another ominous figure lurking nearby, ready to seize you and take you away. It would be effortless to remove him from our path, a simple task indeed. However, my conscience forbids me from taking such a ruthless action, despite his deserving of it. Defeating him in combat would bring peace to my mind, yet I know it may lead to further complications. If I am victorious, and he does not challenge me again, according to chivalric law, I would have the right to claim you as my bride. Nevertheless, I hesitate, for such brutality is against my moral code. May fate be on my side in battle, Ragnvald said. Elfrida replied, but even if we were to overcome the Baron, his brother at the Abbey knows my father's unfortunate secrets, and I fear the consequences that may follow. Let us put that aside for now, my love, one obstacle at a time. Are many knights expected to compete in the tournament? Ragnvald asked. I believe not. My father is not enthusiastic about the event, and I share his sentiment. It is better that few witness my humiliation if it comes to that. Valdis, on the other hand, would prefer weaker opponents, although he likely anticipates an easy victory. Take heart, my dear. I must leave now, but I will watch for the signal daily. May better days come to us in this troubled land. Farewell, my darling, Ragnvald said, and departed for the home on the hills. Chapter 37. The Joust, Saxon and Norman. The moment arrived when Hofsos had promised his daughter's hand to Valdis. In true Norman fashion, the ceremony was preceded by customary festivities, the most notable being the tournament or feat of arms. During the reign of our late King Edward, the Norman nobility who flooded our shores wasted their time on this pastime. Unfortunately, the Saxon nobility, much to my chagrin, aped this vain and foolish inclination, with several Saxons proving themselves equally adept as the most skillful of the Normans. Messengers had dispatched some weeks earlier to various Norman camps within reasonable proximity to invite many knights to participate in the joust.
The venue chosen for this spectacle was a convenient spot situated close to the castle and suitable for the common folk, who never failed to gather in impressive numbers. A sizable hollow with green hillsides and dense copse surrounded the central arena, where multitudes could view the pageantry and struggle for the day's honours. The main arena, where the knights would compete, was a spacious enclosure with a 4-foot railing and 2 entrances/exits, one of each on either side, directly positioned opposite one another. The entrance was where knights, squires, marshals, judges, etc., would enter dressed in full war regalia and glittering accoutrements. The other opening was exclusively for exiting purposes, and through it conquered knights, disabled horses, and others who sought to retire could emerge. To the right of the primary entrance, a raised platform draped in rich tapestry could accommodate 50 persons, and featured a dais or raised central platform upon which rested the throne, a tastefully upholstered chair, reserved for the Queen of Beauty. Crowds waited for some time beyond the appointed time, anxiously anticipating an overseas knight whose messenger had announced his intent to participate in the nightly fray. With a fanfare of trumpets, Count Hofsos emerged from the gates of his castle, accompanied by his daughter and a grand procession of guests, including Abbot Valdis and other clergy, as well as a host of Norman and Saxon nobility. Elfrida took her rightful place beside the throne, wearing the victor's chaplet as a sign of her triumph. She was a vision of beauty, with her dark, flowing hair and captivating eyes, crowned with a delicate wreath of flowers and a solitary gem. All eyes in the room were fixed upon her, entranced by her charm and loveliness. Yet, beneath the surface, there was unease. Many present knew of the groom-to-be's questionable character, notorious for his wickedness and cruelty. Elfrida may have won the crown, but it seemed like a hollow victory with such a terrible fate awaiting her in marriage. Beside her sat Mireille, her lady-in-waiting, who appeared unfazed by the impending nuptials. A mercurial nature, she rarely sought out trouble, but instead looked with eagerness towards the arrival of Gorma, the renowned and valiant hero whom she hoped to catch a glimpse of that day. Despite the weight of her mistress's troubles, Mireille remained serene and composed, her eyes sparkling with anticipation and her cheeks flushed with a rosy hue. Excited by the fluttering of her heart, she scanned the crowd of people lining the enclosure, eagerly awaiting the spectacle. Yet to her, both Saxon and Norman of lesser rank were unworthy of her attention. As her gaze fell upon the despondent Paul Lazaire, she couldn't help a saucy smirk, which Paul took as favour and felt comforted. "Elfrida," said Mireille, turning to her with concern, "I fear the day will meet with disaster, and the Saxon knight will be discovered. I don't know if I could survive it." "Don't be afraid, my lady. I'm quite confident that Gormar and the Earl will be a match for them," replied Mireille. "But Mireille, how could a single knight contend with so many foes?" asked Elfrida. "Indeed, one knight alone would not accomplish much. But let us not forget, my lady, that he will be accompanied by his valiant squire," reassured Mireille. "But a solitary esquire would be no match for them." "If the Earl is discovered, he would be surrounded and killed," Elfrida insisted. "Do not fear, my lady. Gormar will protect him. He'll make short work of those beer-drinking rascals," declared Mireille with confidence. "Truly, Mireille," said Elfrida, unable to keep her smile hidden, "you have great faith in this Gormar." "Why shouldn't I? He's as handsome and valiant as his leader, and I never intend to lose hope or faith. Besides, I have been given an omen, and I have noticed that they always come true if you believe in them," said Mireille. "Oh, really? Pray tell me about this omen," Elfrida prodded. "Well, last night as I went to bed it was not quite dark. I have a little window in my room that overlooks a spot in the woods which I shall not disclose, for it is my secret place," Mireille replied. "Your secret place, Mireille? I fear you'll never be cured of your coquetry and silliness." "But what about your omen?" Elfrida asked impatiently. As I retired for the evening, the sky was still illuminated by the fading light of day. I positioned myself in front of the window that overlooks the location where the Saxon, Gormar, and I typically convene. For over an hour, I recited my prayers. Although directed towards Our Lady, my thoughts still lingered on Gormar. I devoutly prayed, then nestled my beads under my pillow, as was my nightly habit.
My slumber was punctuated by a bizarre dream. In the vision, I was walking through the woodland alone when I suddenly heard a heinous, screeching noise behind me. Spinning around, I witnessed a pack of feral wolves pursuing me. I frantically fled, but was outrun by the animals. As they were upon me, Gormr heroically arrived and scooped me up into his embrace. The brutes swiftly scattered into the trees, whimpering and howling. Accompanied by a devout man, whitened with age, holding a crucifix adorned with our blessed Lord, Gormr took my rosary and hung it about my neck. He then clasped my hand and put a ring on my finger, signifying our marriage. The holy man blessed us as we kneeled before him. Upon waking in the morning, I was surprised to feel the rosary around my neck, and Gormr's kiss, the blush it left upon my cheek, still remained. Mireille happily exclaimed. Mireille's unwavering optimism and hopefulness, though simple, was like a beacon of light shining upon Elfrida, fortifying her for the trying ordeal that lay ahead. Despite her anxiety, Elfrida couldn't help but laugh at the telling of Mireille's dream. Suddenly the castle gates opened once again, and a colourful procession emerged. Heralds, marshals, and judges led the way, followed by a group of knights, each attended by their own esquire, decked out in their armour from head to toe. Elfrida scrutinized each knight closely as they passed by her, dipping their lances in salutation as they went. "The Saxon is not present. I fear something may have happened," Elfrida whispered tremulously to Mireille. "Do not worry, my lady. They will not let us down. Gormr promised me I would see his face today, but I must be careful not to reveal that I recognize him, or I risk betraying them all," Mireille reassured her. The scene that played out before them was a flurry of activity, as the knights and their esquires positioned themselves on either side of the enclosure. The heralds, marshals, and judges rode between them, examining the lances of each combatant to ensure they complied with tourney laws. Meanwhile, Norman soldiers swarmed around the enclosure, with groups of Saxons dotted amongst them. A small gathering of Saxon churls had been huddled together on the fringes of the crowd, engaged in a heated conversation. Despite their downtrodden appearance, it was clear they were united in their purpose. Each of them carried a quarterstaff, an unassuming weapon that complied with tourney regulations. But upon closer inspection, one would see that each ended in a steel goad, cleverly concealed from casual observers. I was drawn to this group in particular, noticing they obeyed signals from their leader, and my gaze gravitated towards the Saxons in the crowd. After observing them intently, I realized their leader was none other than Skuggi. They soon paired off, separating themselves equally amongst the spectators lining the enclosure, all the while pushing their way towards the railing. Now, at a signal, the trumpet sounded once more, and a marshal rode into the centre of the arena. He proclaimed the rules of the tourney as a piercing blast from a distant horn echoed through the greenwood. Emerging from a leafy bower, a knight of great stature appeared, bearing a shield with a rising sun on a green field. The midday sun reflected off his shining armour like molten gold. He rode on a decorated stallion, accompanied by his brawny squire, and 2 men-at-arms following behind. It was whispered that this foreign knight was the reason for the hour-long delay in the tournament. He and his squire were quickly admitted, but the men-at-arms remained outside. Speaking in Norman, the knight consulted with the stewards, and then proceeded towards the dais where the Queen of Beauty was sitting. He dipped his lance and bowed low, causing Queen Elfrida to blush deeply. The observant abbot noticed this. His suspicions were raised. Could this love connection between the foreign knight and the Queen threaten his brother, the Baron? At that point, no other knight had entered the lists, leaving Valdis likely to easily conquer all. Although it was a mere tournament of chivalry, the prospect of being unhorsed vexed Valdis, for he knew it would drive his brother to desperation. The arrival of a tall, martial-looking knight of renown, who seemed to have been hand-picked to foil his brother's hopes of marrying Elfrida, added yet another layer of uncertainty to the day's festivities. The Baron himself, ever suspicious by nature, glared beneath his visor at the newcomer, hate smouldering behind his eyes. Valdis, however, possessed unshakable confidence in his own abilities. His bulk, personal strength, and rapier-like skill had won him many a joust in the past, and he laughed inwardly at the thought of any rival unseating him. but the sight of a younger, handsome, and well-equipped knight like this, one who might with de Montfort's blessing snatch the prize from Valdis's grasp, put him on edge. He swore under his breath and tightened his grip on his lance, ready to push back with all his might. He was clearly up to no good. At last, the herald signalled the start of the tournament. The knights faced off against one another, with their squires standing close behind. Valdis and the stranger found themselves matched against smaller opponents with inferior mounts. The trumpet sounded, and in an instant their horses started to gallop across the field. The impact of the collision was deafening, a tangle of horses and riders rolling on the ground. Valdis had thrown his weight behind one of his weaker opponents, and the horse and rider combo crumpled beneath him. The excitement of the crowd, once vociferous, gave way to a kind of hushed suspense that made Elfrida feel sick. She could tell Valdis and the Knight of the Sun were not yet ready to do battle. But that changed in an instant, as the trumpet blared a second time, spurring the horses forward. The sounds of hooves, the clash of weapons, the cries of the men, all these blended into a blur of fury, as though the very forces of nature had been unleashed. With a dismissive curse, he spun around to his spot, completely ignoring his fallen opponent, whose horse had kicked him hard during its attempts to rise. The Knight of the Sun, on the other hand, rode steadily towards his adversary, using more of a push with his horse's rump than striking him with excessive force. He then quickly jumped off his horse and chivalrously assisted the defeated knight to stand up. In doing so, he asked, "Are you all right, Sir Knight?" "It's just my pride that's bruised," came the reply. "But you fought with great valor and by a more deserving knight. So I yield my horse to you and wish you further victories, which you will have, whether or not I wish it, if I am any judge of your skill and courage. Take your horse, Sir Knight. I have no use for him, as I see there is a better one on the list," said the stranger. "I offer you my hearty congratulations in winning that steed, if they will bring you any luck. A word of advice, though." He lowered his voice while appearing to tweak his sword belt. "Although you are a newcomer, Sir Knight, I have known Valdis for more than a dozen years. He is a vile creature, so beware of him, especially if you happen to throw him down. His twisted soul is infused with poison from head to toe, and there's no treacherous scheme he won't stoop to seek his revenge. Thanks for your good wishes, and I won't be neglecting your advice. But let him look to himself unless he prefers remorse," was the retort. As a bugle sounded, the knights who had previously won rode back into the line, while the two who failed to unhorse each other chose to withdraw from the game. Only 4 knights remained to compete in the next round, and again face the fortunes of the fight. The mysterious knight was now pitted face to face with Valdis, who scanned him up and down before sneeringly turning away. He muttered to himself, "If length of limb counted for anything, he would be formidable enough." At the signal calling for the ready, each knight prepared himself and his lance. The horses sprung forward at the call to charge, and the sound of their hooves marked the beginning of this medieval contest. With many a lance that grazed Mark, the Knight of the Sun, and Valdis wounded, the Knight of the Sun and Valdis emerged victorious. However, Valdis had met his match. The pain of a blow to his stomach caught him off guard and made him dizzy. As he faced off against the Knight of the Sun, Valdis's temper flared, and he hurled curses at his squire Pierre for his slow response. Meanwhile, the tall squire of the stranger carefully unbuckled his master's armor and inspected his horse. In a hushed voice he advised his master, "He is strong and heavy. I recommend avoiding his strike, as he is unmistakably clumsy and slow." "That is exactly what I was thinking," replied the stranger, accepting a shorter lance from his squire. As the bugle sounded again for the ready, Elfrida, half conscious with sickness, grasped the scene dimly. Mireille, Elfrida's lady-in-waiting, comforted her mistress with encouraging words. At last, the final charge began. Both knights focused intently on each other's weapons and prepared to make their final strike. The Knight of the Sun tightly gripped his short lance, and his opponent quickly swerved to dodge it. Valdis's own lance missed its mark and passed over the mailed arm of the victorious knight. Swiftly and skillfully, the jouster regained his balance after dodging the charging Norman's attack. His lance remained fixed on its target, unfaltering even as they drew near enough to embrace. Though his weapon was short, it was pointed directly at his foe's chest.
Valdis, frustrated by his missed strike, abandoned his lance and attempted to strike his opponent with a punch. However, it was a futile gesture, as the stranger dealt a precise blow to Valdis's steel breastplate. The sound of breaking harnesses and the sight of Valdis tumbling to the ground were met with relief from Lady Elfrida, who fainted at the sight. Mireille consoled her, announcing that the stranger had emerged victorious over Valdis's ignominious defeat. The attention of the crowd soon fixed on Valdis, who had risen and unsheathed his broadsword, shouting with bloodthirsty fervour for a battle to the death. As the abbot tried to intervene, Valdis violently rebuffed him, prompting the stranger to dismount and take a defensive stance. While Valdis swung wildly, the stranger calmly parried the attack. Growing exhausted, Valdis made one last attempt at a feeble swing, which was easily blocked by the stranger before quickly dispatching him with a decisive blow to his neck. Valdis expired in his brother's arms, his final words accusing his slayer of being a Saxon. As the cry echoed across the arena, the crowd erupted in frenzied chaos. Horses bucked and brayed, adding to the pandemonium. Skuggi and his group, anticipating any potential complications, sprang into action, expertly maneuvering amidst the thrashing hooves and prodding the animals into further hysteria. As the battle between the champions raged on, the stranger's squire saw an opportunity to snatch the defeated champion's horse. But Pierre, Valdis's loyal squire, fiercely resisted, and the two squires engaged in their intense skirmish. Skuggi urgently whispered to Gorma, "Can you not see the danger? Fly at once, or we'll all meet our demise." Gorma, now understanding the severity of the situation, swiftly mounted his horse and rode off. But before he did, he turned to Pierre with a grim warning. "We will meet again, and you will pay for your treachery." Ragnvald also realized that flight was their only chance at survival. Without hesitation, he mounted his horse and sped towards the gate, with Gorma in tow. The two men-at-arms outside the arena were torn between aiding them and fearing for their own safety.
As they spied the entrance, the Saxons charged through the spectators, forcefully striking their swords upon the shoulders of the churls blocking their way, clearing a path for themselves. Meanwhile, Skuggi and his party caused chaos within the enclosure. Once they passed the entrance, the Saxons were safe, and quickly followed their leader, galloping across the field and disappearing into the woods, leaving the spectators bewildered. Afterwards, Abbot Valdis approached Hofsos, his neck veins bulging with anger, as he accused him of treachery and threatened to take his head. He claimed to possess letters that Hofsos desperately sought, but Valdis vowed to use them against him. As this drama unfolded, the scene turned tragic, leaving onlookers confused and devastated. Elfrida suffered the most, witnessing the abbot's hostile behavior towards her father and hearing the violent threats. Overcome by the overwhelming sense of calamity, she fainted. Mireille and her companion were at a loss. I helped them revive Elfrida, guiding them in carrying her to her room and providing some restoratives to help her regain consciousness. Chapter 38. The Saxons' Revenge. Even those who acquire ill-gotten gains suffer from inner turmoil, according to Homer. On the same night, just 2 hours after the curfew had rung out signalling the time for commoners, attendants, and Saxons to retire to their homes, two shady characters met inside the abbot's room. The wickedness in their expressions and the vicious curses they exchanged demonstrated their malevolent intentions. One of the men had shed his clothing, but the clothes he retained did not match his demeanor or line of work. The other man was dressed as a soldier and was clearly recognizable as Pierre, Baron Valdis's confident and willing accomplice in many of his wicked schemes. The abbot's room was grand, high-ceilinged, and furnished with expensive silk fabrics and Turkish carpets. The furniture was delicately carved from oak and was highly valuable. The Normans had brought many craftsmen of great skill and precision, and their work dotted the room. A quickly devoured meal of boiled capon and venison cutlets had been left on a beautifully carved cabinet. 2 silver tankards were placed on the table, filled repeatedly and copiously with Rhine wine, and were being drained by the 2 men whose thirst seemed unquenchable. On the table were several parchments stamped with the seal of Hofsos, already read by Pierre, which formed the basis of their discussion. The whole tournament deception was arranged by the cunning Hofsos and his daughter, said the abbot.
the introduction of a supposed foreign cousin was designed to prevent disclosure of the Saxon rogue and his actions. The timing of his arrival added to the deception, allowing nobody to detect his disguise, not to mention his well-spoken Norman language.
The leniency of Hofsos towards those Saxon wolves on the hills has long been a source of curiosity for me, remarked Pierre, his brow furrowed in thought. Despite professing to send for help from William during his visit to York, we have yet to see any aid materialize. Hofsos is indeed a cunning man, replied his reverence with a frown. It is imperative that we act quickly, or he will outmaneuver us yet. Pierre leaned forward, his eyes narrowed with interest. What do you propose, your reverence? Shall we make use of those letters to bring him to justice? His reverence nodded, a grim smile playing on his lips. Exactly so. And I would have you, Pierre, take up this task. It requires a man of courage and determination, and I have no doubt that you are the one to see it through. You must journey to the court of His Majesty William, and lay bare the damning proof of de Montfort's treachery. If all goes according to plan within 3 months, the traitor's head will be adorning the gates of his castle, and with his lands forfeit, I can secure their possession and bring that haughty daughter of his to heel once and for all. Pierre raised an eyebrow. And what of Adhelm, your reverence? He is no friend of de Montfort's, yet you speak of teaching him a lesson as well. His reverence's lips twisted into a sneer. The old hypocrite has long been a thorn in my side, taking refuge under the protection of de Montfort's daughter. It is time to deal with them both, and I see no better man for the job than you, Pierre. Revenge may be sweet, but the spoils will be sweeter yet. Pierre leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. I will consider your proposition, your reverence. He fixed his gaze on his mentor. But tell me, what then? Once we have our revenge, what then? I would require either the hide or the carcass, certainly, should I happen to shoot the deer. Otherwise I shall not trouble myself with the chase. Thus I implore you to tell me. How will this endeavour profit me? The devil's work, as we are well aware, ought to receive just compensation, for we may yet suffer for it in the future. Is that not so? Worry not, Pierre, for you shall receive everything that I can bestow upon you. You will find that within my exalted position, my abilities to promote your accomplishments shall be equalled by your deservedness. What do you think? Will you contemplate the life of a monk? There is nothing simpler. I myself was once a soldier before I took on the hair shirt and engaged in the practice of mortifying the flesh, as you are well aware, at all times most rigidly. It's entirely true. The devil himself would certainly testify to it, and a most amusing joke it is. Presently, following in your reverence's footsteps, there is no telling when the devil himself may become a monk one day, and truthfully, by imitating your reverence closely, he would make more sinners than by his previous trickeries. Pierre laughed heartily. Pierre, you have always been a quick-witted speaker, and with equally little regard for those in authority. However, I absolve you. Nonetheless, I suggest that you also explore the holy calling. Then what could prevent me from bestowing upon you the position of abbot? The best of all things would be at your command. Leisure, wine, women, and a gluttonous, well-fed table at all times. I guarantee that there is no life merrier nor more bountiful than the command of a well-endowed monastery. "Bravo!" shouted Pierre, tickled pink by the abbot's proposal. Bursting into laughter once more, he exclaimed, "This is just too good!" Pierre turned "San-ha-ha-ha! This is after the most divine example of your grace, I venture. Ha-ha! Excellent! Anyhow, I shall drink to that." He downed the tankard and slammed it down on the table, laughing uproariously. "You are a donkey, Pierre! A blatant donkey!" exclaimed the abbot, highly irked at how Pierre mocked him and his duty. "Can your mind not fathom that once the Baron has passed away, de Montfort will dispose of us easily if we do not outsmart him? To frolic under the hangman's noose and conclude with the peril of being hanged is nonsensical." "Very well. I shall thoughtfully weigh in on this matter," answered Pierre in a marginally more sensible tone. "Your Excellency has made a compelling case, and I believe it holds merit. I am unsure how the sneaky route of handling things, as opposed to the bold approach familiar to me, will entice me. I've always preferred the pursuit to the kill, and admittedly, I'd rather fight it out until the final round. But," he blurted, bursting into a hearty chuckle as the absurdest notion of him becoming a monk crossed his mind, and reverting into his commonly sarcastic and humorous wit,
Given that you vouch for it, perhaps I should retire from active duty and fatten up like you. In any event, it's reasonable to assume that the bigger the belly, the more wine it will contain, and that's an asset. It's also true that lethargic living and a lustful longing are joined at the hip. Less energy for work and more for lewdness. That's the essence of it. I am convinced, Your Eminence. Curse me. What more can a man ask for? If he can lust robustly and indulge in meals heartily with a full stomach, what more could he wish for? My hand on it, Your Eminence. I'll take on the risk. It's a lunatic gamble, but I don't despise it for it. So when will you commence your journey, Pierre? Time is of worth. The Earl is aware that I have those letters, and mind you, he will take every step to deceive us if he can. If you fill my pockets with gold, I'll begin at daybreak, and let de Montfort try to catch up with me once I receive a head start, Pierre replied. The door slowly opened behind them, revealing Ragnvald, Gormer, and a couple of armed attendants. One stout yeoman blocked the exit, sealing them in. Valdis's countenance fell on the instant, as though a sword had pierced him, and he became livid as death. He hastily tried to hide the letters lying on the table, abject terror overcoming him. Meanwhile, Pierre unsheathed his broadsword and stood fiercely at bay, his savage valour in striking contrast to the cowering cowardice of the abbot. Gormer advanced towards Pierre, saying, "This fellow is mine. You have already had your revenge. Give place, master." Addressing Pierre directly, he continued, "I told you, did I not, that the time would come when you should answer to me for your acts of cruelty and murder? The time has come now, and you can no longer shirk the fate that has long awaited you." Pierre strode towards Gormer, replying savagely, "Did I ever shirk meeting you or any churlish Saxon in Britain? Give me fair play, and I'll give you a speedy passage to the devil, sirrah." Thus the two stood upon their guard. The abbot remained cowering in one corner, whilst Ragnvald and his followers looked on in anxious suspense. Both Pierre and Gormer were known for their strength, brutal valour, and skill in combat. The rapid advancing and retreating, with each stroke and parry they made, wrought the spectators to such a pitch of excitement that they held their breath almost to suffocation. The climax arrived unexpectedly. Gormer thrust his sword with considerable force at his enemy, but Pierre promptly blocked the attack with his sword. The strength of the blow, however, caused the treacherous weapon to split in two, with the tip landing on the other side of the room and the hilt, half of the broken blade, remaining in Gormer's grasp. Before Ragnvald could intervene, Pierre shouted, "Aha! Now I have you!" and lunged furiously at Gormer's body. While Pierre's words were factual, they did not hold the intended meaning. With speed akin to lightning, Gormer sprang out of harm's way, causing the shining weapon to miss him. Pierre had been so confident that his opponent was defenseless and that his attack would be lethal that he didn't bother to safeguard himself. In addition, his own impetus combined with the force that Gormer used to thrust the broken blade meant that it pierced Pierre's body, causing him to fall on his face, dead. At the end of the dreadful spectacle, the abbot crawled to Ragnvald's feet, begging in despair for mercy. One of Ragnvald's soldiers approached him and declared, "Leave him to me, sir. You wretched beast. The day of reckoning has come for you. You haven't forgotten the little cottage out there, sullied by your heinous presence. Nor have you forgotten the boy you killed in cold blood, waiting to be avenged till this very moment. The time for retribution has arrived." "Have mercy on me," groaned the abbot. "I will make it up to you with substantial compensation. Take this valuable golden chain," he said, removing a weighty gold chain from his neck, "and I will give you more. If you believe a gold chain will compensate me for my deceased child, you are gravely mistaken, you vile creature. His blood demands justice, and I will administer it now." As he spoke, he lifted his sword and decapitated the abbot with one sharp blow. "This is an abhorrent task," uttered Ragnvald, "and to be carried out within the sacred confines of this structure is detestable. However, deeds as nefarious as those these men have consistently and shamelessly committed call for drastic measures. Men, collect these bodies and lay them deep in the woods before sunrise." The two guardians summoned their neighbouring comrades from the hallways, and cloaking the corpses in the abbot's vestments, transported their gruesome load through the corridors and out of the premises, to be interred in secrecy within the woods. Ragnvald and Germa remained, conducting a thorough investigation. "This individual possesses certain papers of immense value to one I am determined to aid," conveyed Ragnvald. "We must locate them before we depart from this location." I glimpsed the abbot hastily hide some documents upon our arrival. I suspect these are the letters I am seeking to obtain. With that, he strode towards the cabinet and opened it, rapidly retrieving the letters that had almost caused so much harm to the life and happiness of Elfrida Hofsos. The seal of Hofsos captured Ragnvald's attention, and he scrutinized each one hastily, relishing their contents. As he grasped their significance, he muttered to Germa, "These letters are absolutely priceless. They reveal one terrible error from a mind that is otherwise quite shrewd. They have been a source of agony for their writer for an extended period of time. Now this awful secret will be forever concealed, buried alongside those who utilized it without morals. In time, these records too will succumb to obscurity." Thereupon he secreted them in his pocket and continued the thorough search. However, they failed to locate anything else that was relevant to their mission.
"Our efforts in this locale have seemingly concluded for the time being," voiced Ragnvald. "Allow us to depart, as I desire to complete the tasks set for this day. I am aware of individuals who presently exist in a state of overwhelming anxiety and are apprehensively anticipating the progression of this calamity. Therefore, let us depart, as the night is young and my presence is urgently besought." Chapter 39. Beware the Viking. Through bog and steep, straight, rough, dense or rare terrain, with wings, feet, head or hands, pursuing without restraint, swimming, sinking, wading, creeping or flying, all feats achievable for one never ceasing, never dying. As we left Bjarni and his followers in the mountain cave, restlessness consumed him, and further attacks he craved. One man obeyed his commands and ascended the peak, signaling their scattered band. In hiding they did seek. This messenger climbed peak after peak, scaling the loftiest of all with a view unique. Summits towering heavenwards in the distance hazy, weird valleys in between, silver lakes shining, placid and lazy. The inspiration of this mighty scene braced the man's senses despite being unlearned, uncivil and unclean. With unkempt locks and beard, he was stirred by the cool mountain breeze. Through every vein his body coursed energy that his lungs did seize, intense inward satisfaction of the sight, betokened by guttural sounds, until a fierce fire of rage took flight. Soldiers in the valley with Norman hounds, on the trail of Bjarni, whom they had found. Without delay, he didn't bother to light the beacon, which was meant to signal his allies hidden in far-off valleys and hills. He swiftly scaled the hill's ridge, and with quick, nimble steps almost seemed to fly towards the secret hiding place where he had left his master. Upon finding him, he quickly explained the dire circumstances. With a ferocious curse, the chieftain snarled, "Ha! They hunt me like a beast again, as if I'm a wild hog or a wolf. Let them beware. The mountain's wild boar will show them more sport than they can handle, like he has countless times before. I suspect it will be a long chase, for these Norman hounds are skilled trackers and won't be shaken off easily. Follow the river upstream, and we'll traverse over the hill, for they've laid a trap below. From there we'll descend into Deepdale, continuing around the head of Ulleswater. You'll get a lead on them, and can take it easy." "What will you do, Jarl? If you plan to confront those Norman dogs, we'd rather stand by your side and share in the danger. I'll leave it up to fate. Skuld, the Viking's old friend, watches over me. I will not be slain. But one thing I must do is draw their attention towards me to divert them from this place. We can't let the hounds lead them here, for this spot is our secret refuge in times of need. When I confront them, I will follow shortly after you. As you climb the summit, keep watch. If I need you, I'll signal, but let's hope it won't come to that." The two men equipped themselves only with swords to travel light, and followed the waterway, which marked the divide between the hills on either side. It was flanked on both sides by thick forest that extended for more than a mile further up the stream, until the inhospitable zone was reached. Here the mountain's frigid air stunted the growth of trees and shrubs, and shelter could only be found among the countless, massive limestone boulders which loomed over the rapid, tumbling waters. Bjarni was swift in gathering his supplies and storing them in a robust leather case that he strapped onto his shoulders. He armed himself with his broadsword, fastening it to his belt. He slithered out of his hiding place and trudged upwards, navigating through the dense vegetation until he reached an open area on the bald mountainside. He aimed to divert the Norman's hounds from the trail leading to the cave overseeing the tarn and lure them in his direction. He wasn't afraid of confronting them, as he had faith in his ability to hold them off and tire them if necessary. Once he left the woods, he climbed a little way up the hill, surveying meticulously the pathway along which the enemy troops would advance. All was calm and tranquil, so he sat down to monitor his surroundings. Soon enough, the barking of hounds and the clamour of soldiers reached his ears, and he sprang to his feet in anticipation. Out in the distance, approaching alongside the mountain, he spotted a couple of figures, 2 men with their hounds, followed by 30 or 40 men-at-arms. He ascended a hillock, ostensibly to observe the spectacle, but in actuality to beckon their attention towards him. For a moment he stood there, a conspicuous sight on the barren hillside, and was rapidly spotted by the Normans. They burst into a resounding cheer, jubilant at the sight of their dreadful adversary so close to falling into their hands. Bjarni waved his sword gallantly in their faces, and then propelled himself towards his troops as they headed towards the valley's head. The Normans chased after him frenziedly, with Bjarni leading their way almost continuously in view, supposedly a few moments away from being seized. As they advanced forward towards the valley, it transformed into a forlorn and eerie place, brimming with a sense of dread. From the summits of the mountains, jagged limestone rocks protruded starkly, devoid of any signs of vegetation, bare, intimidating, dark and ominous.